I'm making a video today specifically for my family. One of my granddaughters, Brittany, suggested a video would be a good thing. What we're going to look at today is my trip to Alaska, flying an airplane up there, and it's a documentation of this thing. And I want to say one more thing, and that's the fact that everything is no script to it today. It's only what's coming out of my head, and that's it. I'm going to give you a brief overview of everything, and I have a lot of details that I have to explain to you before we get into the actual trip itself, because it'll make understanding what happened a lot easier. This turns out to be a great adventure. As far as I'm concerned, it's the one thing in my life that I'm aware of that is the most important achievement of my life. And I think when you see the results of the entire video, hopefully you understand why I feel that way. I've done a lot of things on this trip that I wasn't ever supposed to do, and I think it came out pretty slick. With that in mind, this is a video that is really a man and machine put together. This airplane fit like a hand on a glove to me. And I'm going to show you right now. This is an oil painting of the airplane. It's an Aero Commander 680 FL Grand Commander. It's an 11-place airplane. It's just a grand airplane to fly. I'm going to tell you how I got into that, because I really didn't know I was going to do this either. One of my students had that painting made for me. Here's the actual airplane right now. This is what the airplane looks like. Okay, this is a photograph, the other is a painting. My purpose here is to pass on something that was really important to me, to my entire family, and for the generations down. And then I'm sure some of you are friends, they're just curious about what I've done, and that's really neat. I'm really pleased to be able to do this. This project was actually a contract with a company called Convergent Systems in Fort Collins with the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. And the professor in charge of that, the principal investigator, was a doctor named Dr. Taku Otaki. I don't have any pictures of him, but you'll see the results of all the flying that we did. When he wrote the contract, the title on the actual contract was A Study of Ice Crystals on the Arctic Ocean. So this airplane has been modified highly. It runs in the restricted category. Did at that point in time. Now it's back to a normal category, but anytime you poke holes in an airplane and put different things on it, it has to be operated in the restricted category. And that means that only flight crew can fly on board the aircraft, because it's basically as a test bed at that point in time. Some of the pictures will show different stuff, but on top of the airplane are two particle sizing things called Nolenberg probes. Not shown on here is a decelerator tube. It's a long tube about 12, 14 feet long. It slows the ice crystals down so that we can make a replication of it. And just a side note on that, one day we were going into Wiley Post in Oklahoma City, the airport there, and had that big decelerator tube on the top of it. And the air traffic controller asked me, he said, "What is that thing on the top of your airplane?" Well, I had an answer, of course, and I learned right then that you can't outwit an air traffic controller. But I said, we affectionately call that our anteater. And the guy came back immediately and he says, "Wow, it must have a really long tongue." See, you can never get a one-upman on those guys, but that's kind of what it looked like. We had temperature probes on there. There's a boom that sticks out, which you'll be able to see in one of the other photos later on. There's a boom that came out of the front of the airplane that for airspeed, angle of attack, and those kinds of things. We took a lot of parameters here, and remember that this was 45 years ago. This happened in 1977. I thought it was going to be really something. Normally, when you're flying a restricted category airplane, that is classed as a research pilot, and the insurance companies normally will not allow or write a policy on a person on a pilot that has anything less than 2,500 hours. And folks, I want to tell you, when this trip happened, I only had 650. So that's a fourth of what you're supposed to have. Now, the reason that they insured me like that is because of the training that I got in the Colorado State University's Aero Commander 500B, a smaller, a 6-place airplane like this, but it was a 6-place instead of an 11-place. And that airplane was piloted by a gentleman named Dwayne Adam. And I would like to dedicate this entire series of this adventure to Dwayne Adam, because without Dwayne's tutelage and training of me, we flew a lot together, flying research and doing this, that, and the other across the country, and aerial photography and atmospheric science sampling and all that sort of thing. And I got to fly the airplane quite a bit, as in addition to being in the back operating cameras or other equipment. So that training, several hundred hours of that kind of training, allowed the insurance company to look that over. And I'm sure that I know this came with a high recommendation from Dwayne. And I never could figure out why I got chosen for that, except for the fact that what I put together is that Dwayne was no longer with the university. He was running the FBO up at Scottsbluff, and he couldn't do it. The gentleman that was supposed to fly it, shortly before the project occurred, got a job flying Learjets all over the world. And that was his dream. And so he was off and about, and there were only a couple of other people that might have been qualified, but once again, they had to work. So a gentleman named Jack Simmons, J.B. Jack Simmons, was the owner of Convergent Systems, along with his wife, Harriet. Paul found something else that he would rather do, and so it kind of left this position open. So based on all of that information that I've given you about what I did in past or with the 500B and doing that kind of thing, Dwayne was able to recommend me for this job. I started flying this airplane in October of 1976 and getting training in it. Actual mission didn't start till, I have to look at my logbook, and that's what I'll do. This project started in about mid-March. So that was the purpose, was to find ice crystals on the Arctic Ocean. And we had all the equipment on board the airplane to do that with. And Dwayne used to do that. We flew the 500B at the university in the same kind of stuff. This just happens to be an outside company, and they actually leased me or rented me, however you want to put it, from the university, because I was a university employee out at the Engineering Research Center, which is out by the CSU airport. Based on that, I got a lot of training in this airplane. It's a big airplane. It weighs 8,500 pounds gross weight. The engines on it are 385 horsepower each, and they're both 8-cylinder engines instead of the typical 4 or 6. And they're geared engines, which means the engines turn faster than the propeller does. Prop would turn at those RPMs, it would go supersonic, and you'd break the tip of the prop off. So anyway, this airplane I was the only pilot. JB or Jack, same person, was the second investigator on the portion. He's the one that wrote the contract that specified the things that we as a crew would do, and then Professor Otaki was the one that wrote the specifications on the contract so that everything was followed the way he wanted it. Larry is going to be here a little bit later today, or maybe we may not get this all done today, I'm not sure, but whenever Larry plays a principal part in some of the activities that happened here, a little thing called the Great Bombi Incident. Larry is the principal character in that, so Larry will be here and we'll get to meet him. I've lost track of JB and his wife Harriet. I have no idea. I mean, I went one way, they went another way, and I have no idea where he might be at this point in time. Larry doesn't seem to know either. But I was able to find Larry because I knew where he lived and he hadn't moved. So I was able to get a hold of him a few weeks ago and ask him if he'd like to come and be a part of this video. And so he'll be here in another segment. And all the equipment that we had on board, all the Arctic wear that we had the heavy clothes and the bunny boots. It was the warmest it ever got when we got to Point Barrow was minus 26. That was a daily high. We'd get down to 35, 40, 45 below at night. So it was a pretty cool deal, but all of that stuff weighed, and we had to have it all. So with that, I think that I can't think of anything else. Dave, can you think? Oh, and by the way, I need to mention the fact that Dave Engelken is one of my prized son-in-laws, and he's doing the video for me today. Okay, we're back. Now it's time to start the trip to Fairbanks, Alaska. And to do that, we're going to go from downtown Fort Collins, which is a little runway of 4,700 feet long. It's a little bit short, but it's a good runway. So we're going to go by the way, that airport is now closed, but back in 1977, that was our downtown Fort Collins airport. So we're going to go from there to Great Falls, Montana, and then we're going to go from Great Falls to Edmonton, Alberta, I think it is, and we'll stay overnight in Edmonton, and then the next day we'll go on from Edmonton to Whitehorse, and then from Whitehorse on into Fairbanks. So it's in like 4 or 5 segments here. So I was right when I said the middle of March. It was the 18th of March, according to my logbook, that we departed downtown. Anyway, we're going to stay overnight in Edmonton. And so with that, now comes the time when Dwayne's training and tutelage is really going to pay off once we get in the air. So what I'm going to do on the takeoff on this, when I get on the runway to take off, I'm going to leave the airplane on the ground for an extra 10 to 15 knots. We need the airspeed before we rotate and start do the lift thing. So we're going to use probably at least half of the runway, maybe a little more than that, maybe 5/8 of the runway, and then we should be able to lift off and be okay. So I filed for everything we're going to do from all the trips, and we're going from point A to point B on this trip will be done under instrument flight rules. That's the safe way of doing things, so you got some eyeballs looking out for you on the radar screen. The flights that we take up, the research flights, will be VFR, which is visual flight rules, and we'll use those up there to where we don't have to talk to anybody. But meantime, we're going to be in the clouds in instrument conditions where I'm going to fly the airplane with reference only to instruments, not outside. We're in the cloud, we can't see anything. I know Great Falls was down a little bit under minimum landing conditions, but we'll get there and see what we come up with for the approach. So anyway, we begin the takeoff roll, and I let the aircraft accelerate to I don't remember the speeds, but it was about 10 to 15 knots above the normal rotate speed. And we went from there and we climbed up to, let's see, if I'm going east, we're going to go to 12,000 feet. I think that's the altitude that I filed for. If you go to 12,500, anything above 12,500, you have to be one pilot has to be on oxygen, which means that I would have to be on oxygen all the time, and I don't want to do that. So by staying down at either 11,000 or 12,000, we have still good speed characteristics at the lower altitude, but yet we can stay out from under the oxygen. You don't have to suck on that all day long. So anyway, we filed, we went ahead and got in the air and opened the flight plan, and we're off to Great Falls. So a few hours later, we arrived in the Great Falls area. Center cleared us for an instrument landing system approach, which is a precision approach. It has both vertical and horizontal guidance on the instruments that I'm looking at. And so we follow the glide path down to the runway, and hopefully we break out. The conditions have gotten a little worse that day, so we're kind of in a situation where it's going to be pretty marginal to find the runway. I went ahead with the approach, the ILS approach, and fortunately broke out about The minimum would be 200 feet above the runway. Otherwise, I would have to make a missed approach and go around. In this case, it was okay. We broke out at 400 feet. So went ahead and landed, had the landing gear and the flaps and the power and everything set correctly. We landed and went in and got fuel. So that took us, I don't know, 45 minutes probably, stretch our legs and so on and so forth. And then we got back in the airplane and had to make an instrument takeoff. In other words, we climbed out after we got to 400 feet, we were back in the clouds. And so we headed on toward Edmonton and crossed the border. Now at Edmonton, the Canadian government does things a little bit different. They force you to be, whether you're VFR or IFR, either way, they force you to be on a flight plan. And the reason for that is because there are so many areas in Canada that you can get lost in. I mean, they would not know where to find you. It's even worse than here. They don't have the radar coverage or the navigational abilities that we have here in the United States. At least they didn't at that time. We're off and we're in Canadian airspace now, and a few hours later we landed in VFR conditions. It was a nice day in Edmonton, so as I recall, and so we went ahead and landed and tied the airplane down. However, on looking at the airplane, doing a quick walk around to make sure everything's okay, I noticed that we got quite a bit of oil coming out of the left engine. That obviously concerned me, and it concerned JB. So we're looking at this. We got a mechanic that was there that was not qualified to work on the airplane, but was able to look at it and give us some advice. It turns out that we lost a supercharger seal. These engines are big. I told you that a while ago. They're 385 horsepower, 8-cylinder engines, and they are supercharged. And I don't know what the difference, to be honest with you, between supercharged and turbocharged is. I know what turbocharged is. That's a separate unit, but the supercharged, I'm not sure. All I know is that the gentleman said we lost a supercharger seal. Well, I believe that, but it wasn't bad enough to stop us from going. We just added some oil and the next day and headed for Whitehorse. Now, Whitehorse is a different animal because it's all surrounded with mountains. And when I looked back at the flight charts that I had, I could see that they also had, it looks like they have an instrument landing system there also. But that's not what was available to us that day. And the only way I could figure to get down, I pondered that a lot, so did Jack, was to circle, kind of spiral down and stay within the limits that I knew was safe territory. My charts tell me what's safe and what's not, because it was surrounded by mountains and on at least 3 sides. I went ahead and did a modified circle and just round and round we spiraled, corkscrewed down to the ground, and broke out with good VFR conditions out of the clouds, and were able to go in and land. At a quart of oil, but we're doing okay on oil consumption. I think that airplane, as I recall, has 13 quarts of oil per engine. So it has a large oil reservoir, which will come into play later in this story. But right at this point in time, we had plenty of oil and everything's okay. So we took off that afternoon, same day that we left Edmonton, and headed for Fairbanks. Now we're back in U.S. airspace, and we're at once again at 11 or 12,000. I can't remember which it was. And I should know that. I'm a flight instructor, and I should know which direction's which, but sitting here making a video, I'm not thinking about that too well. So it doesn't matter what the altitude was. The fact of the matter is we were in instrument conditions. Fairbanks was open, but it was getting toward dark. I remember doing the ILS approach into Fairbanks. Yeah, it was pretty dark. It was getting pretty dark. Went ahead and followed the ILS procedure down and landed in Fairbanks. And then the search began to find someone that could repair our airplane, because there's no way that I'm going to fly that airplane, any airplane, over the Brooks Range, which the Brooks Range is even more desolate than most of the ranges here in Colorado. So there's no place to land if you lose an engine or lose power. So I wanted to make sure that and so did Jack, that we had a good flyable airplane. So we began the search for that. The next day, it was too late that night, we found, believe it or not, in Fairbanks, Alaska, we only found one mechanic that was qualified to work on that airplane. So we really didn't have any choice, and we went over and chatted with the guy. He was at a little field in downtown Fairbanks. The main airport's south of town, as I recall, but the little Phillips Field is a little 2,700 foot ski runway. So we're going over there and take a look around and see what we can do there. This would be the third day of our trip. So the gentleman's name was Bob Johnson, and he was a very nice guy, did a good job for us, but he told me, I said, can you come over to International Airport and work on our airplane? He says, nope, no chance. He says, I don't go off of my airport. He says, if you can't get that airplane in here, I can't work on it. Well, we didn't have a lot of choices, and this is one of the things that I think we'll take a little break right here, and I've got a couple of pictures that I'd like to show you about how we got into Phillips Field. So we'll take a break and we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, we're back, and quite frankly, to this point in time, it's been kind of boring. I know that going from point A to point B is not the most fun thing to do in the world, but now the big adventure begins. Now is the fun time, doing stuff that I've not supposed to have ever done before. So I mentioned a while ago that there was a 2,700 foot ski runway. Well, the snow part of the runway is 2,700 feet. On the west end of that runway is a asphalt surface, paved surface, that's about 700 feet long. I had my choice, and I have a photograph here. Larry Casper, who will be with us later today, took these pictures from the ground. He was sitting down here near the runway and took two photos that are really pretty significant. This is the first one, and this thing right here kind of looks like a row of houses or something, but it's not. This is the front of the airplane, and this is the nose boom that comes out that samples airspeed and angle of attack and that stuff. That's what all these little gizmos are for out here on the end of it. But anyway, this is part of the airplane, not part of the ground. So over here, these are rows of trees. That's not the runway. This little spot here, right there, is the asphalt part of the runway, the west end of it. Now the reason I'm looking at this is because on this end of the runway, there were big power lines just off the end of the runway, that 50-foot obstacle. This way is almost kind of worse because it's got 50, 60-foot trees on it. And you'll see that better in the next photo, but all these little black things are trees. What I found was that I wanted to touch down on that asphalt. I wanted my wheels on asphalt so I didn't slide sideways. That was the goal. The problem is that in order to get to that runway, these trees are really tall. So it would have meant if I'm going to do it just straight into the runway without any maneuvering, it would have meant a really steep dive down to that runway, and that wasn't cool. I solved that problem, and of course we did a flyover a day before we did this. I solved that little problem by doing this. Now Larry's sitting down here off the runway a little bit. You notice the airplane's tipped. The way this worked, see these two trees right here? I found out that I could go 20 to 30 feet below those trees and have 10 feet on either side of the wing without hitting a tree. This is not something I'd recommend that anybody do, but it's what I had to do back then. You come down through here and you clear the trees, then it becomes, I actually came down lower than this. I was in a slight turn to correct for what I had to do. But once I got past these trees, It was a left turn, a right turn, flare, and land. So the runway would actually be over here somewhere, down in this area. So I had to move over about 50 feet, maybe 60, something like that, in order to catch that runway. Now, it worked. The only problem was I got this left main gear here. I got it off the asphalt about a foot, okay? And of course, that being a lot of drag, wanted the airplane to turn to the left. So I was constantly stepping on the right rudder pedal and tapping on the brake, the right brake, to get it back up on the runway, which I did. It came back up on the runway. We taxied to the end of the runway, turned around and came back in, and all was well to that point. Now, this was the original picture of the airplane that we saw earlier, but down here is the fixed base operation. This is the Texaco place that Bob Johnson is the proprietor of, and he's the gentleman that's going to work on the airplane. And this is a heater here, a BT-400 heater. Anyway, oddly enough, we got down, pulled the airplane into this parking place right here, and all of a sudden there were like, 25 people around the airplane. What is going on? So I got out of the airplane and asked some of the people what's going on. And the guy says, you know what? We thought you were just doing aerial photography or something across the runway. We didn't think you were going to land. We've never had a big airplane like that in here before. We only have little single-engine ski airplanes that land on that stuff. We've never had a big twin-engine airplane like this land. After we got there, we unloaded everything out of the airplane, took the front nose boom off, and the decelerator tube, I don't see it on there either. We took every ounce of stuff off of that airplane that we could get, knowing that this short runway was going to be our major issue. A snow-packed runway, am I going to slide off the other end of the runway? I don't know. So we wanted the airplane as light as possible, and as a result, Larry was on the ground to take those photographs that we showed, and Jack was in the airplane with me, making sure that I was doing everything cool. And we landed, and all was well. Having said all that, the airplane then, he had to repair it, which means in order that supercharger seal is located in the middle of the engine somewhere. So he had to take all the cowling off, had a big hoist, took the engine off of the airplane, and then separated the engine so that he could get that seal replaced. 2 weeks later, it took 2 weeks to do that. Bob was just really good about it. I had to get parts and so on and so forth. And when you're up in that kind of country, getting parts takes a little time. But we finally got that done. But I have to tell you, in the middle of that, we had 2 weeks of downtime. So Larry and I, Professor Otaki had already gotten permission for us to use the University of Alaska swimming pool and their athletic facilities. So we spent a lot of time in the swimming pool. And then, of course, we always wanted to go have a beer. And there was a little place very close to the airport, because we didn't have a car, that we could walk to. It was called the Bear Affair. Well, we figured it probably was the Bear Affair. So anyway, we went there and went in the only door that we could find to go in. And sure enough, if you took a left, it was Ladies of the Evening type performing. So we walked through that. Once you've been through there, you've seen everything. It's all our intent to get out of there. We just didn't care for that at all. But we found out that we could then go downstairs to the lower part of the building, and it was a dance floor and a band. And every night they had a band, a little combo, a girl and her brother. She played saxophone, and I think he might have played trumpet. I can't remember what they were, and I think they had a drummer. I don't remember, but we spent quite a bit we didn't have anything else to do other than go eat. So we spent quite a bit of time down there listening to them. The kind of ironic thing about it was that at that time, 1977, you could buy a bottle of Coors beer at the bar for 50 cents. Up there, it was $2.50. We didn't drink a lot of beer because the tab would stoke up pretty quickly. But we had a fun time. It was a good pastime, and it was good. The people in the band were really nice, and of course they got to know us because we were in there every night just about for at least a period of time. And it was a fun deal. It got us through the time. But then the airplane was finally ready to go 2 weeks later. And I don't know whether this is kosher or not, but I was told always in my flying career, if some mechanic is going to work on your airplane and do something major to the engine, that when you did a test flight, he ought to be in the airplane with you, because this makes him make sure that things are right. So I did that with Bob Johnson, and oddly enough, he agreed to go with me. So I actually did that same approach again with Bob Johnson on board. Worked out well this time, even better than the first time. And I ended up making 2 more. I think I made a total of 4 landings at that airport, and they all came out just fine. I had a good processor to where I could get down through those trees. I'll remind you again that we had to get down below these trees here and kind of above this one. So I'm not quite down there yet, but it's a little unnerving going through and knowing that those trees are only 10 feet off your wingtip. I couldn't make any mistakes. I couldn't believe it. I just didn't have that kind of experience, but I've got it now. So it was fun. The airplane checked out fine, and Bob was happy with it, and I was happy with it. And so it's time to head on to Point Barrow. After 13 or 14 days in Fairbanks, it was good to get on up to do our project. We now headed from Fairbanks up to Point Barrow, and Point Barrow is different than Barrow. Barrow is the Eskimo village, okay, and they have a big concrete runway. They get 737s in there all the time, taking people in and out of Barrow. But we were on Point Barrow, which is the Naval Air Station, NAS Barrow, Point Barrow. The runway, another little thing I'd never done before, the runway was made out of PSP, perforated steel planking. It's made for tundras that they used in Vietnam or all over the Southeast Asia to build temporary runways with. Of course, Point Barrow is on tundra, and it warms up in the summertime, and things get gooey, and then it gets cold again. The whole time we were there, the temperature never got above minus 26 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was nippy cold all the time, and from that we had a lot of different things to look at temperature-wise. I've always said that if you go to Alaska and you're going to be out there in the wintertime doing anything, if you don't learn fast, you die. It's just the way it is. And I will have some things in the next segment that will kind of point to what I'm talking about. Anyway, we made it to Point Barrow, and now we're in the process. We're going to deal with the United States Air Force and the United States Navy, because both have some entities there. We'll talk about that in the next segment, if that's okay. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, we're back, and we're currently at Point Barrow, Alaska. And I happen to have with me on my right, Larry Casper. Larry, of course, was the technician that went on this little adventure with me. We're the only 2 that we know of at this point in time. We don't know where JB's at and haven't heard from him, so we have no idea. But we're going to tell our side of the story from there, right?
Right.
Okay. So what happened, I made a comment a while ago that you have to learn fast or you die when you're in Alaska. That's kind of pretty true, huh?
Very true.
Okay. So when we got there, Jack tried to work with the Department of the Air Force, but they would not sell us any aviation gas. They had 100 low lead and they had jet fuel, but they would not sell it to us. What they would do, however, was sell it to us in 55-gallon drums that were buried in the tundra, left over from World War II. Remember that? So I got a picture here. Larry, why don't you hold that up? And I'm going to read what that caption says since you can't read it. It says that the study title was Ice Crystals Over the Arctic Ocean. That was the name of the project. And the principal scientist was Professor Taku Otaki from the University of Alaska. The date was March of 1977, and it actually kind of turns out to be April. And it's a 680 FL Grand Commander, and I was the pilot, Jack Simmons and Larry Casper. The reading down here at the bottom says, refueling the atmospheric science research aircraft with avgas using a wobble pump. The fuel left over from World War II was stored in 55-gallon drums buried in the Arctic tundra for more than 20 years. At the time this photo was taken, at the Point Barrow Naval Air Station, the temperature was minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can see what a project that was. I don't remember how long it was. I think it probably took about 20-25 minutes per barrel to pump that down.
At least.
Maybe 30.
It's very thick.
Yeah, we'd spend the whole afternoon out there pumping fuel. But we went through several 55-gallon drums of fuel. Also, if you look at this, we talked about these are the particle sizing probes. There's two of them on the airplane. They run with a special wire in front, but they tell how big the ice crystal is. And there's a thing that comes up through the fuselage. It's called a Formvar replicator with Formvar oil, if you're familiar with that from chemistry. And then there was a temperature probe on there, a Rosemont temperature probe, and we had, and then the boom, which we showed in that one approach slide, the boom that sticks out the front of the nose that picks up airspeed and angle of attack and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
What else did we have on there? We had
another probe that we used nichrome wire on the side, and the relationship to the angle of attack did something for us.
See, Larry knows about this
about
stuff.
ice crystals and everything else.
Okay. Larry's the one that was the technician, so he would know. All I did was fly the airplane.
I spent a lot of time calibrating.
That was kind of a little bit of a problem for us. Took quite a bit of time. But the next kicker that we never had any trouble, till the end with Navy. We'll get to that story later on. The big deal was that Air Force had a huge hangar that would actually be big enough to store 3 B-52 bombers in. And we were allowed to be in that hangar. They kept that hangar at 55 degrees Fahrenheit all the time. So it was a good, comfortable temperature. The airplane just fine and all was well. But we were smarter than that. When we got there, we decided that airplane had a lot of oil in each engine, and it would be a lot better for the engines if it was thinner so it could do a good job on the oil on the engine. And so we went over to the supply shack, the supply thing of the Navy base, and we found 2 heaters that were about this. They looked like a stick of dynamite. They were about this long and about that big around and plugged into 110 volts. So we thought, this is perfect. So we plugged them in and suspended them in the oil sumps for each engine. Gee, that worked good. That oil was so nice and toasty warm the next morning when we came out to fly. We went ahead and pulled the airplane out of the hangar. All is well. We were always taught to point the airplane into the wind so it couldn't get blown around or anything like that. So we pointed it into the wind, and then we closed that big hangar door and we went inside for a 10-minute briefing. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we came back out and we all got in the airplane, 4 of us. There would be Professor Otaki sitting next to me, and I'm in the pilot's seat. And then you were in the back with the equipment. The little Taku's little Japanese grad student was in the other seat, and he was helping take data. We got in, and I always alternated starting the engines left to right one time and right to left the next time, back and forth. Well, this just so happened to be my time to start the left engine. The primer switch was up here. I primed the engine. The magneto switches and starter switches were over here, and the throttles were in this throttle quadrant down here. And I could look out the window and see the right propeller. I've got my hand up here to start it. I've got my hand on the mixture controls and stuff down here. And I'm looking back here, and I turned the starter switch, and it cranked and cranked and cranked, and it just wouldn't start. I flooded it. It ran the battery down. Well, the Air Force has a unit that generates all kinds of 28-volt DC that we needed to turn the starter motor. We borrowed that and hooked it up to the airplane, and that was all well and cool. We had grunches of power. Yeah. We jumped back in the airplane. We've got ground power unit now, and everything's good. So I gingerly primed the right engine and got it right. And I'm going to start it. I'm doing this, and I'm looking out the window, because I was looking out the window this way for the left engine. Now I'm looking back here, looking out the window, and I turned the starter. Within one revolution of that thing, I mean, it was going to start, but it just started spewing oil out the front of the thing. Black oil. I mean, it just looked like we struck oil in Texas. Anyway, I shut it down immediately. Had to. I got oil everywhere. Well, what happened was that we were smarter than the people that live in Alaska. We had heated that oil to 70 degrees, but we pulled the airplane out, and every engine's got an oil cooler on it to where the oil gets pumped through this before it gets to the engine and cools it down, so it extends the life of the oil and everything works right. Well, we didn't think about the fact that it was sitting out there for 10 minutes in minus 25 or 30 degree temperatures with about a 20-knot wind blowing into it. Congealed the oil to the consistency of thick honey. The oil pump on the engine produces 100 pounds of pressure, so that nice warm oil at 100 pounds is shoving this congealed oil that's out here now. It had to go somewhere, and it blew a hole in the oil cooler. It was a ½ an inch high at the inlet, and it tapered down to nothing in about 6 inches. And all that oil was just coming out over the front of the engine. Well, that put us out of business for, what, would it take us 3 days?
At least.
It must have been about 3 days. There was one mechanic on the Naval Air Station. His name was Buster Points. And he had, well, you guys know the red and black checkered shirt? That's what he had. I got one too, and I call it my Buster Points jacket. Okay. Buster was the only A&P mechanic, airplane and power plant mechanic, on the entire North Slope. So we didn't have a lot of choice of what to do here. But Buster said, I won't work on your airplane. Well, why not? Well, I'm just not going to. He was flying a DC-3 on skis all the time and stuff like that, and he just said, I won't work on your airplane. But he said, what I will do, if you and Larry will change that oil cooler, I will inspect your work and sign it off if it's okay. Well, we had no choice, so Larry and I said, okay, and we tore into the engine, didn't we? We didn't know squat, but we took the cowling off and removed everything that we had to do. Buster loaned us some tools. We had some tools with us. Buster loaned us enough stuff to get the job done. But the problem was that once we got the thing off, we had already ordered a new one, but that had to come from Nome, Alaska. And that was like, I think we got it overnighted up there or something, but it had to come from somewhere else. It wasn't there. So when it got there, we put it in, didn't we?
Yeah. But at least we were in a warm hangar.
Yep, so that's good too. Buster loaned us a light because it was dark in there. We changed that oil cooler and put it all back together. Had Buster come over and inspect it before we started it up. Then we pulled it outside and started it up and didn't have any leaks. We done good. We got it running again, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we lost a couple of days of research time.
We lost quite a few days now and then, and most of it was because we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
pretty
a
sure
problem.
the warmest day when we were up there, we had a spring break of minus 28.
Yeah, minus 28.
Because the guys were out playing basketball in t-shirts for a few minutes.
Yeah. That's how we got started before we ever took any data. We learned after that we were told we couldn't start the engines in the hangar. So what we tried to do is we stuffed socks in those oil cooler things to keep them, and then quickly got in. That worked fairly well, but the real deal was we finally decided that since there was nobody around and it was a mile back to the base, we were out there kind of all by ourselves. We would simply start the engines in the hangar, open the door, start the engines, taxi it out. Jack would close the doors. We're all ready to go. We go to the runway and take off. That worked the best, and we never got caught. See, that's one of the
I have no knowledge of that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what happened to us at the Point Barrow that slowed us down greatly. We flew for, I think, about 10 days worth of flying out in the open ocean. Not open, it was all iced over. What we were looking for were the open ice leads that create pressure ridges. Were out on the ocean in the frozen stuff. That's where the ice crystals would come up. To tell you what an ice crystal looks like, because Dave asked this question a while ago. We've all seen a day when the trees were all just white and glistening in the sunlight, and the things are just kind of floating around in the air. Those are ice crystals. That's what we were looking for. Those are only found, they're not found where it's frozen. They're found where it's opened up and got open water, and it creates a pressure ridge. And that pressure ridge is probably, it could be as high as 20 or 30 feet tall probably, but the ones we were dealing with were typically about 10 feet tall. When in that briefing, I asked Professor Otake what kind of a profile was he looking for? And he said, I would like a vertical sounding beginning at 10,000 feet, circular down, corkscrew down to right over the open ice lead. And he said, I would like to go down as low as you can go, but certainly we could at least get down to 300 feet. And I looked at him and kind of chuckled, because if you remember, I talked about Dwayne Adam a while ago, and I'm telling you, Dwayne, if it wouldn't have been for Dwayne, Larry and I wouldn't be talking to you today. I'll tell you that, and you'll find out that a little bit later. Dwayne, he taught me to love flying low. We borrowed equipment from NASA Ames at San Jose and come off and on with the 500B Commander. And he and I would come back flying. We had to climb to go over fences. That's how low. We're 2 feet off the ground. So I told Otake, I said, okay, how does 2 feet sound to you? Oh, he said, that's marvelous. Remember he said that?
Mm-hmm.
So okay, we'll give you a vertical sounding. We'll do it gliding down, and we'll climb whatever you want to do. We'll be glad to do. So we did that. Inside the airplane, we had a thing that I told you a minute ago, it was called a form var replicator. It was where you took a chemistry slide that's this tall and this wide, coated it with a certain form var oil is what they call it. And when it's cold like that, when an ice crystal hits it, it makes an impression, and after the ice crystal melts out, it leaves an impression of that snowflower, that ice crystal. We had a thing that kind of looked like a shotgun that went up, stuck it up through the hole in the top of the fuselage, and then when we get down over the ice crystals, Professor Otake would he had his back to me, and he would sit there and he would go chink, chink. That would open the cover, the ice crystal hit it, we'd close it again, and he'd bring it down and put another slide in it. So we did that over and over again at different altitudes, and it was really, I don't know what the outcome of this project was? Because I never knew, right?
I never heard any more about
Yeah,
it.
we never heard anything about it because, well, I was to fly the airplane, Larry was to take the data, and we had no way to be part of the crew of the data taking, or analysis. That was all really cool until one day, I think it must have been about the third or fourth day in. Well, let's go back to the first day, the first flight we made. When we're coming back in to the airport, remember the only way we could tell Jack to come, Jack had a vehicle, an AV vehicle, one of only 3 or 4 on the entire western slope or northern slope. So Jack had the vehicle, and the only way we could tell him to come and get us was to make a low pass over the airport, and he would come out, hear us, and come out and get us, right? Because it was a mile away from the barracks. So I'm on final approach, and my whole deal was to make a low approach and then peel off like this and just make a really fun thing. It was a fun thing to do. And so it's a high speed strafing run, man. I'm going right down to the runway, and I'm going to fly 2 feet off the runway, and then I'm going to go to the end, and I'm going to peel up like that. Well, the first time we did that, Professor Otaki is sitting right beside me. And he got all excited and started jumping down like this. And he says, "No yeggs, no yeggs, no yeggs." And he's really frantic. And what's going on? And finally, Larry figured it out, and he hollered at me. He says, "He means no landing gear." Okay. I don't have the gear down that. There's no legs. That's right. But we're just going to make a pass, and we're going to come back. And I explained that to him, and he kind of melted back into his seat and said, "Okay." So we put the gear down and landed, all was well. Jack came and picked us up. Anyway, that third or fourth day when we got into this thing, Professor Otaki, in order to take those form bar replication tests, he sat between, like Larry, this would be his seat, this is my seat, Professor Otaki. Professor Otaki would sit down here on the floor with his back towards us. So we're going forward, he's looking back. He made a bad mistake. When we got down there was a beautiful open ice lead that I just sucked it right down on the water and kind of peeled out over the icebergs. And there's no evidence, by the way, that I ever hit a iceberg with a prop tip. No evidence of that. But anyway, Professor Otaki, the poor guy, made the mistake of looking out the windows when I was down there. And we're doing 170 knots. Or 150 probably at least, and the iceberg just flying by like this, and he looked at that, and he got motion sick instantly. He got back up in the seat. He was all kind of gray and green, and he says, "We go back to barracks, back to base, need whiskey." And he was true to his word. I said, "Okay." I could see the man was hurting bad, and we went back and landed, did our thing and landed, told Jack we were there, and started pumping fuel. Here we go. We're pumping fuel. 45 minutes later, Professor Otaki and his little grad assistant showed up. They're both just 3 sheets to the wind. And they went back and got the whiskey, didn't they?
And drank quickly. He was a very nice guy. He was fun.
He was. Agreed. What else you got to say about this?
I really don't. It's an experience. You just have to be there. You can see forever, and all it is huge blocks of ice. Then Don's down here flying between them, looking for open water, which was more of it than we would have thought.
There was, that's right.
Because when it opens up, it doesn't open up a little crack in the ice. There's this thunder and roaring, and you have 5-mile crack. 50 feet wide, quarter a mile in places.
Yeah. The one that I made Professor Otaki sick in, it was about 60 or 70 feet wide because the airplane fit down in there real nice. Yeah. And then I had to climb to get out of it. And it was probably, the better part of a quarter mile long, I guess. Yeah.
But the speed at which these things opened up. it's perfectly flat, and all of a sudden there's a big pile of ice, and then there's a river appears.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Anyway, that's kind of the start of those flights. I have another flight that I want to get into in a few minutes, but let's take a break right now, Dave.
A quick question. Were you guys ever scared flying in, especially you, Larry, being a passenger?
No. Well,
it was not scary.
You know what your task is.
Right.
You know what you need to do. There's never really a moment of where you're uncomfortable. Because
I was in hog heaven flying the airplane. That was the neatest thing I ever
he's
done.
getting to play. I'm sitting there playing and having a whole new world experience. So, no, you can't get afraid. Well, it just doesn't occur to you to be afraid.
No. No, it just, being afraid wasn't part of the deal. I never felt threatened by any of the stuff we were doing. You have any other questions?
No, that's good.
Okay. Okay, we're back on again. I had something I forgot to talk about a minute ago, or earlier in the thing. I had mentioned Dwayne Adam and all the experience that I got in this Aero Commander. This is a 500B Commander that was owned by Colorado State University. And that's where I got most of my experience and training, was in this airplane when we had all kinds of time to talk. Dwayne was just great. That's why I've dedicated this whole program to him. Without him, Larry and I would not be here today. And you'll understand that a little bit later. Okay. All right, back into where we're at. We're taking data over the open ice leads and this sort of thing. And I recall, I believe it was on the I don't know which day it was. Yes, I do too. It was on the 9th of April, 1977. Okay, the next day was Easter Sunday. This is Saturday, the 9th of April. What we have here, I'm going to affectionately call the Great Bombi Incident. Okay, that's what I've always called it. That's what it's going to be again today. Okay, so we're out flying along on the 9th. We've done our soundings and we've done several things that Professor Otaki wanted us to do. One of the things that we saw, that we circled around and saw, was on the open ice lead was a walrus, a big walrus. We spotted that. Larry actually, I think, is the one that spotted it. And we made a couple circles around to look at it and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. It was a relatively short flight that day. We went back in and landed and got the airplane ready for the next flight and all that kind of good stuff. And by that time, it's probably, 11 o'clock in the morning. Like I said, the warmest it ever got while we were there was minus 26. It was just one cold Jose all the time. But anyway, you learn to live with that. Anyway, we got back to the base and got the airplane put away and went into our barracks were in the Naval Arctic Research Laboratory. That's a big complex, and it is the only running water sewer system on the entire North Slope, at least at that point in time. Everybody else, including the Eskimo village, survived on honey buckets. And you can imagine what a honey bucket is. I don't have to go any further than that. Right? So anyway, when we got back and got the airplane put away, Larry here came to Jack and I, and he said it was a slow day. Saturday afternoon, a slow day. Everybody was on off, not having to work because it was Easter weekend. So they're all kind of sitting around doing this, playing double-deck pinochle, and the Navy guys, and they had a pool table and a ping pong table, and so Jack and I had been playing pool. Larry came up and said, "Guess what, guys? I'm going out on the ice." "Oh, you are, huh?" "Yeah," he says, "I want to go see if I can find that walrus that we saw today." "Okay, he's got a big Bowie knife about that long." He says, "I got a knife and I'm in good shape. You want to go from here?"
Well, the story changes a little bit at that point. I was going out on the ice, no problem. The base commander found out about it, or that's what I'm going to call him.
But that's before you left, though, right? I mean, way before.
This is way before I left. But I got called in to meet with him that I wasn't going out on the ice because you had to have a weapon to go out on the ice. Okay, no problem. Provide me with a weapon. Because I showed him the knife. I says, this for chopping ice and whatever else I need at the moment. He says, no. He says, you have to have firearms. He says, can I use firearms? I said, yes, I'm very good with firearms. He agreed to lend me one of their rifles and ammo, and I showed him I knew how to use it, and he reluctantly agreed to let this old farm boy from the lower states go out on the ice. He really didn't want to, but I guess I was persistent. So out on the ice I go. Yeah. And it seems odd. You're in a place where there's the only living people are in a 5-mile radius. One's a village and one's a little naval base. But I says, I've got the compass, I got my bearings here. You can see the airport light for miles and miles. No problem. I know where the walrus is. Off I go.
And that's when the fun began.
Meanwhile, back at the barracks.
Yeah, let me step in here and tell you what happened. So by this time, it's in the afternoon, no big deal. Jack and I think we may have drunk one beer that day, but no more than that. I think we did early in the afternoon. But sometime around, we played pool and did this, that, and the other. The GIs, the Navy guys, were over in the corner playing double-deck pinochle. They've been playing all day long, and I understand that because I used to do that too. But anyway, they're playing cards and just having a good time, but they're drinking their share of beer. It's a weekend off. Tomorrow's Easter. They don't have to work, so they know they got time off. So they're out and about and just drinking up a storm. Well, about, I'm going to say 10 o'clock in the evening. Of course, it's dark outside. About 10 o'clock in the evening, Professor Otaki came up to us, to Jack and I, and said, "Where's Larry?" "Oh, he went out on the ice. He's trying to find that walrus that we saw this morning." That was enough said. The GI guys over here, the Navy guys, heard that comment. And they went into protect mode instantly. They popped up and said, "Does he have a weapon?" "No, he's got his big knife." We didn't know he had a gun. He's got a big knife though. "Oh, we can't let him stay out there. We have to go find him." And I said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" "We're going to go down to the maintenance shed, and we have a tracked vehicle, a Bombardier. That's why I call it a Bombi. A Bombardier on tracked vehicles, a tracked vehicle with skis for direction. And we're going to get that, and we're going to go out on the ice, and we're going to find Larry so that a polar bear or something doesn't get him." Well, Jack and I talked about that, and we both agreed that since it was our technician, our person that was out on the ice, that it didn't seem right to let the Navy people that were well-oiled go out by themselves for fear something would go wrong and they wouldn't be able to get back. So, it made sense that Jack stayed there in case he had to talk to the commander. The base commander was gone for the weekend, but he had a Lieutenant JG in charge for him, and so Jack talked to him and knew what was going on. Meantime, I volunteered, said, yes, I'm the logical one to go out with the Bombardier and see what's going on. So we wandered down to the maintenance garage where this thing was stored, and it had the drivers on the left side and the passenger on the right side. And guess what? I'm sitting in here on the engine compartment. Had a little 4-cylinder diesel engine in it, and I'm sitting on the compartment on that, and off we go. And I told him, I said, let's go to the north end of the base where the runway's at, because that's where he's going to go to leave. "Oh, no, we need to go down to the south end of the base and go there. We can get on there, and that'll be better." And I said, well, I don't know why it's better, but okay. So I agreed. Well, what am I going to do? They got the vehicle. So we went down to the other end and we got out on the ice. I don't know, maybe, 100 yards, maybe a little further than that. And we're driving along, and I mean, it's dark outside. It's pitch dark. And I remember nights when we used to go out and step outside the barracks. And if you want to know what deafening silence is, that's what it is. The air is so cold. There is no movement of molecules through it, and it is just absolutely, that's most quietest place I've ever been. But anyway, so we're out here, we're driving along in this Bombardier, paralleling the shoreline, and I had remembered something about, I don't know how far out it is, but there's a ledge drop off out there that drops like 2,000 feet. Down in the ocean out there, and all I could think of was, man, I hope we don't get out far enough to get involved in that thing, and that wouldn't be good. So we're driving along, and pretty soon the driver says, he looks out in the front of him, and he says, he sees this little square of no snow on it, and he says, that's ice, that's ice. And I said, yeah, I can see that, no problem. We drove another 100 yards. He said, saw another one. He said, that's ice too. Okay, I get that. The third one that he says he saw, he said, that's not ice, that's water. We have to go around that. I says, okay, I agree with that, because otherwise we fall in. So we made a left turn and went out further on the ice. And when he felt like it was an appropriate time to turn in, that there was no more danger from that water, he made a right turn. And we're going to go around this thing and get out. By this time, we're 200 or 300 yards, maybe 150 yards out there. I don't know. There's no way to figure out what the distances were. But all of a sudden, I heard this very loud, deep-throated noise, it was kind of a horrible sound. It was a deep, deep, deep bass sound. And then the Bombi started tipping like this. And I realized that we had broken through the ice. And we were tipping like this, and we were going down. Now, I had a little, you'll see it in a picture later on, but I had a little beaver, my little beaver hat, that it was on my head. And when this thing went down like this, I'm in the middle, so I'm standing on this guy. This guy's completely submerged, okay, as it goes down, but about halfway down, the light was on, and it turned green from the seawater, and then the windshield imploded, okay? Unfortunately, the guy that I was standing on had gotten a cut on his arm, cut through his jacket. And we had heavy Arctic gear on. We were not in any kind of big trouble there at that point in time. But anyway, so this thing just came to an abrupt stop. The engine ingested water, bent all the internal parts of the engine got bent up. But so this thing went down, and I thought, oh man, I'm grabbing for air, and I'm trying to figure out how to get this guy out from under me. And it stopped with this much of the machine showing above the thing. And I was saying, thank goodness, it didn't go completely down. But to me, the strongest point, if you're going to get out of that vehicle at that point in time, is to go back where it's safe. When something like that goes down, the ice in front of it breaks, the ice in back of it breaks, and the ice up here breaks. But back at the back, it's solid. So I said, okay, the guy that was driving this thing, instead of going out on the ice, he gets out and jumps forward right back into the ocean. Except now he doesn't have a life preserver or anything on, but it's great big chunks of ice. Meantime, I'm inside with the only thing that was not submerged on me was just the top of my little bunny skin hat. My head was underwater, and I've grabbed a chunk of air, and I'm trying to get this guy out. So I finally got off of him and moved him over to where he could get up and grab some air. We did that. Then I helped him out to get out the doorway and to go back where the ice was solid, where the track was at. And he got out there, and I said, wait right here. And meantime, the other guy, the driver, is in the drink over here, and he's flailing around. And I asked the other guy, the passenger, to come and help me get him out. So we got him up out of the water, and come to find out, when he jumped in, he hit his knee on one of those icebergs, and so his knee's hurting bad, and he can't hardly walk. Well, we were a good quarter of a mile from the barracks, and the air temperature was, I'm going to guess, minus 35. And seawater doesn't freeze quite as easy as regular water does, but we headed back to the barracks. I knew which way to go, and I'm encouraging these guys to go. And they told me more than once, we got to stop. I got to rest. We got to rest. And I said, guys, if you stop here, you will not get up again. You will freeze to death right out here in quick order. And so they understood that, and they've agreed to follow me back to the barracks. And I got one on each arm and this kind of good stuff. And we get back to the barracks. Those guys' clothes was frozen like mine was, but they could not. All of us had keys to the barracks, but they couldn't get to their keys. Fortunately, I was able to get to mine. And we got there, and the entrance to the Naval Arctic Research Lab on this end led to the museum, where Wiley Post and Will Rogers' pieces of their airplane, when they crashed a few miles from here, where they died, their tombs are out there. They had pieces of the airplane in the museum. And so we go open the door and get in the museum, and there's a long hall that goes down to where the research lab's at, where we stayed and where the rec room was and stuff like that. And we're in there, and we're just frozen, and you couldn't hardly move. Your clothes is just solid, and you're just about had it, and you know you're almost frozen. And I looked down the hall, and guess what? There stood Larry. Okay? So in the whole gist of things, I'll let him finish the story here, but in the gist of all that stuff, we almost lost 3 of us to find one of us, and it was just a screwed up zoo. But anyway, your thoughts on that?
Well, after me and the commander agreed that I could go out, I packed up and off on the ice I went. I had the bearings. I knew where the walrus was, or where I believed I would find him. Off across the ice I went. And I'm looking at the world around me. The silence, you walk a while. You learn up there real quick, never sweat. Because if you do, it freezes. So you walk, you start to feel hot, you stop. So I'd sit on an iceberg and look around and listen, and continued marching out across there. Well, at some point in the late afternoon or dark, I don't even remember now, I was out quite a ways, and I crossed paths of a polar bear that was traveling at a different angle than me, headed in toward Barrow. Okay, polar bear went that way, I'm going this way, no problem. But I keep walking along, and pretty soon I'm thinking, polar bear, he's probably looking for walrus too. This might not be a good idea. And somewhere around this time, it's starting to occur to me, maybe I better turn around and go back. So, at a nice leisurely pace, I come back. I get to the barracks, open the door and walk in, and this woman comes running up to me and jumps in my arms. You're safe. What? First of all, it was a woman I actually picked up hitchhiking down in Colorado many years before. Turned out she went to school and got a chance to go up to Point Barrow and do a summer internship or something. I don't know exactly, but she was studying tundra, and she remembered me. Why is everybody so excited? Well, a polar bear went through Barrow and did a lot of damage, and they ended up killing it. Mainly because polar bears find people pretty tasty too if you can't find a seal. But mainly they forage all the food, and that's just as bad. So, okay, I'm safe, everybody's happy, all is good. And I'm talking to her, and I look across her shoulder, and here's some people I recognize. Very wet, very froze. They don't look as happy as I am. What in the world? What are they doing out, and why are they froze? And I don't remember the rest of the evening. Everybody was happy. Everybody was alive. But the next day, I was called to see the commander again, or whoever he was. I don't remember. He was unhappy with me.
Actually, it was the day after that. It was Monday, because the next day was, well, that all occurred on Sunday, on early Sunday morning.
So the
So it was on Monday, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The timelines, and I thought I was going to be a goner. I could see I was going to be in a barracks somewhere for doing something. But as it turns out, I was okay. I did what I was supposed to and such. Now we're back to Dawn, who knows more of the story, because I don't remember the outcome except I didn't go to jail.
Well, it turns out that Larry got called in first, and it was on Monday morning when the base commander got back. And that poor little Lieutenant JG, I'm not sure what the outcome was him. His first name, as I recall, was Andy. That's all I remember about him. But anyway, the base commander had called Larry in. He called Jack in and talked to him, and then he called me in. And I have some photos here that, I should show these right now before I get too far carried away. This is just a nice parting shot of the airplane. The purple skies, the low sun angle and all that kind of good stuff. It was around Easter. So that was, of course, me. These pictures all had the base commander on board with me. This is before the Bombi incident. Okay, so this is how I got to know the commander. And I got to know him pretty well. So there's one picture. Here is another picture. And if you look at that real close, I've titled this one Parked. Doesn't it look like that airplane's parked behind that iceberg? Well, it was doing 170 miles an hour when that picture was taken. Wow. And Larry took the picture, and how do you get that camera speed to be perfect like that? I don't know. Here's another one of it, of a different angle, coming from the other direction, where we're once again 2 feet above the deck and, headed for the iceberg. And I had the commander on board with me, and we finished it up, the flight, with this nice little fun thing here. So that's how I got to know the commander, and everything I thought was really well and good until I got called in on Monday morning. And I wouldn't say that he gave me a butt chewing necessarily, but he was not a happy camper. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what?" He says, "You guys destroyed my $20,000 Bombardier." Remember, this is 1977, not today. He says, "You guys destroyed my Bombardier," because it was still out in the ocean there. And of course, salt water ate up the copper, everything. The engine ingested the salt water and bent the connecting rods, and it was destroyed. It was totaled. And he says, "You guys did that," and he says, I'm really upset with you especially." And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Because you endorsed this thing and went out on that trip, and I expected you, being the aircraft commander, to be the one person that would have some kind of common sense or something, but you guys destroyed my vehicle." Oh, well, okay, sir. You know, whatever you say you have. He said, what do you got to say for yourself? Well, I told him the story. Okay, I told him exactly what happened, how that we'd gone around this thing, the condition of the two guys with me, and that I had gotten them out from the Bombardier and got them out and got the other guy out of the water, and we walked back to the barracks, and they wanted to stop, and they would have gone to sleep and died right there, but I encouraged him back in, and he leaned back in his chair like this and twiddled his thumbs a little bit, and he said, so what you're trying to tell me is that you actually were a hero in this deal, and you saved my two men's lives instead of the other way around. And I said, well, sir, that's how I see it. I went along for that purpose. I was not inebriated. I went along to try to keep these gentlemen out of trouble. And I said, it just didn't work. And he said, well, let me tell you what got you. He said, when you go out that far, he says, if you'd have gone to the north end of the place, you'd have been okay. But he said, where you were at, that so happens to be in line with the chow hall drain, where they have all this hot water coming out. And he said, it undercuts the ice. And he says, that's what you ran into, was that area where that chow hall's at. Even that far out, because they continuously run water. And he says, so I agree with you after hearing your story. It fits with everything that I've heard. And he says, I do believe that you should be considered a hero in this system, in this incident. And I want to thank you for that. And, you know, I got kind of choked up, and I didn't know what to say, because I thought I was going to end up having to pay for that thing or something like that. I don't know, but I hate blowing my own horn, but that was the reason that Jack and I decided that I should go and he should stay. So it worked out well. Nobody got seriously hurt, and it turned out okay. But the next day when I saw what a mess it was, they were trying to get a big crane and get it out of the water. It was kind of a mess. So anyway, that's how the Great Bombi incident ended, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right.
Where your mouth and nostrils are, because everything else is a half pound of your moisture from your breath throws to your
Yeah,
lungs.
and you cannot suck in a big breath initially. No. You have to take in small puffs so your lungs get used to it. Otherwise, you freeze your lungs.
Yeah.
It's like divers.
I thought of that.
You control your breathing. You never breathe hard. You never yell, because you can't.
Well, nobody to hear you either.
Yeah, but
Well, and you guys
But
didn't
you-
know that he had a gun either. The commander
No.
didn't tell you guys, right?
The
Well,
what now?
The commander
the
didn't tell
commander was gone.
Well, the
Yeah.
guy that gave you the gun,
Yes, but
he never communicated that
He
to
That's
you.
correct, but he gave him the gun that afternoon before he left or something.
Yeah.
yeah,
And we had no idea. He just
So
hot footed it out.
they thought he was unarmed,
yeah.
other than his Bowie knife, which
And-
you probably
Right.
take
Apparently,
that too.
putting Don's part of it together, that commander must have left after he talked to me. So
Yeah.
he
Yes,
may have never
yeah.
just thought to even tell whoever replaced him that.
Yeah, and I don't know where he went for the weekend. He went somewhere, whether he went into Barrow or what he did, because I'm not aware that there's any flights or anything. Commercial flights come in and out of there, but why would you leave for a day and a half?
Right.
So I suspect that he
Unless
probably,
he had to go do something else.
yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
We don't know what happened to him. We just know he wasn't there when Larry left, and when we got the Bombardier out, we don't know. And he was back on Monday morning, or I suppose it could have been as late as Tuesday morning, but I thought it was Monday morning.
I don't know. Timeline.
I know it wasn't Sunday. That's all I know, but that was Easter. So this whole thing started occurring about 11 o'clock at night and ended up at 2, 3 in the morning being
But
the end of the story.
the sun was out, right?
No, it was
No.
That was one of those.
darker than the
Oh,
Ace of Spades.
it was dark. Okay.
it was normal time of the year for like it would be here. You had about 10, 11 hours of sun and 13 or 14 hours of dark. But man, when it's dark, it is some kind of dark. In Fairbanks, we could see the northern lights, Aurora Borealis. Beautiful. We were so far north at Barrow that we were under them and you couldn't see them. So, yeah,
Not
that's how
near as impressive.
far up in the
This is
circle.
kind of dark, where you can't, it's right there in front of you, you can't see it.
Yeah, you
on
couldn't
this
see it.
part,
No.
You're thinking, how can I be out on the ice doing this? The ice glows.
It's crazy.
Wow.
The sky is dark, but it's not really dark.
No, it's not.
Because of reflection off the white ice.
I don't know how to explain
It
it.
just kind of rolls.
It's
The intensity just kind of does this.
That's cool.
It's really different. And the only way I can, you will not experience that when you're as far away as Fairbanks just looking at it. But when you're underneath it, as we were clear up we're way inside the Arctic Circle. And when you're underneath it, you can see these different changes that happen to the ice and to the air. It just kind of floats along like that.
Pretty cool.
yeah.
That's what I remember.
And I often thought about, what if I hadn't turned around? If I would have went ahead and did my thing, probably would have been just fine. But these guys come in, okay, rescue attempt failed.
They're frozen
For
to
all
death.
I know, they would have had the entire damn army out, or the Navy guys out
Right.
there. Well, actually, it's just not Navy; it's Air Force, because the guys from the radar stations that run across there, we had interesting conversations with them, or at least I did, because they tell me,
Yeah, but
How
the
do you stay
GIs
up?
that were there were all Navy.
okay,
But yeah, you're right. There were a lot of civilians up there doing other stuff.
there was a lot of stuff going
And I have no idea where the commander went for the weekend. No idea whatsoever. I just know that he was madder than a little wet hen when he called me in. Because he hadn't heard my side of the story. All he had heard about was, see, you interview these guys that went out there that I was with. They're going to do anything to CYA. You know, they're covering their tracks as much as they can, and Lord only knows what they told him, and what his assumption was, and what the way it looked initially. I mean, he had it the way it looked. That's how anybody would have taken it, not knowing the other side of the story. But he heard the other side of the story, and he actually trusted me. I felt that way. He and I got along. We saw eye to eye, good together. And, I'd taken him for that airplane ride and stuff, and he was a good guy. Did I say that the commander was on board in these things?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was one of those
Because
things.
those were all just, actually, those are kind of like publicity photos at that point.
Like what?
Publicity
Yeah,
photos.
yeah. That's what it was.
They're recording, okay.
PR flights.
We got, that's the word.
That's what it was. But
Research dollars got to have some proof of something happened.
did you look at the relative distance with that one, Dave? How far above the ground it really looks to be, knowing how
looks like
thick that airplane is?
what, 50 feet? I don't know what that is.
Huh?
I don't know what that is.
Closer than that.
Oh, that airplane's about 3 feet above the ice.
3 feet?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
a
Think-
frame of
it's-
reference, that fuselage from the bottom to the top is almost 5 feet.
Okay. Oh yeah, you're skimming along there.
Along the ice.
So,
And the
yeah.
nice thing about the Aero Commander, the way it's shaped, and you can really see it on here, because this is, even though the other one's bigger, you can see it. It flies at a -4 degrees angle of attack, so it's always set up to, if I would have touched the water, it would have been okay. It would have been just like a boat.
Because you're
Touching
touching
down.
the back.
Yeah, just would have touched it and skimmed, but I never touched it. I never got the props on that one.
You knew what you were doing.
So,
That's cool. Very cool.
okay, so we have one segment. Okay, here we are back again. I'm kind of thinking this might be the final section. I think that ultimately we end up back in Fort Collins, but A lot of water in the bridge between there and there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of mountains too. Brooks
Yeah.
Range.
yeah. We did a research flight. This shows, yeah, we went back to Fairbanks International from there. And then, let's see, was that on the same day?
No.
No, it was 2 days in June. No, where's the one up here? There we go. 16th and 17th. Whenever it was, Professor Otaki invited us over to his house for a royal dinner. He had everything. He had shrimp and crab and I don't know what kind of fish. I mean, he laid out a real spread for us. Smoked salmon. I mean, it was fantastic. He was a great guy. I can always remember him in the morning we went to the barracks, remember? The chow hall?
Mm-hmm.
And he would order 2 eggs and they'd come in a bowl. And he would take his chopsticks and pick out the umbilical cord and discard that and then eat the eggs raw. That's Japanese custom, and he was good at it. He was a really nice guy. I enjoyed working with him. Yeah, his no yeggs thing and need whiskey. You had to hear that to really get the full impact of it. It was great. We finished up the projects at Point Barrow, and I can't think of anything that we haven't thought about. We went back down to Fairbanks for a night. We stayed overnight in Fairbanks, and then we got up the next day and headed for Juneau, being the capital of the state. But we didn't get off the ground until late in the afternoon. By the time we got to Juneau, it was like 11 o'clock at night, if you recall. It was darker than the Ace of Spades. But here's the deal. This is where I really want you to listen to this, what I'm going to say. We were on instruments all the time, in the clouds the entire day. By this time of the night, we'd flown quite a ways, and I was pretty well worn out. But I had to get down and pull my bootstraps up. When we were on the approach into Juneau, I remember things weren't going quite well. They weren't going the way I thought they ought to go. And I remember thinking, at that time, Alaska only had one VOR station, which is variable omni range. That's your navigation aid. They only had one. Everything else was done by ADF or radio beacon. You know, we could do an approach off of a radio tower or whatever. And that's everything in Alaska at that time, except that one VOR was all ADF type stuff, automatic direction finder. We were in the soup, and navigating by that stuff is kind of hard anyway. And I used the autopilot some where I could on the straightaways. I was a young pilot. I remember I only had 650 hours, and I was not about to let auto take an approach away from me, an autopilot. I needed the experience and I needed the approaches. This particular approach, once again, I think we were at 11,000 that night, either 11 or 12, whatever it was. But as I got close, we had another piece of equipment on the board that's called DME, and it's a thing that's called distance measuring equipment. And that's where it gets a signal off the ground that's beamed up to the airplane, and you can, if you drew a right triangle, that would be the hypotenuse of the right triangle. And that's the distance to that point. And everything in the airplane is based on that DME distance. So in this particular approach, we had the localizer is the thing that gives you azimuth information, in other words, left and right, to whether you're on course to go to the airport or whether you're left of it or right of it. It shows you that. And the DME, it was a step approach, so that if I was at, say, 12,000 and coming in, I was supposed to be at 11.5. I was supposed to come in and make the closer you got, the more you could step down to a different altitude. But this kept you above the terrain, and it worked out quite well. But I realized at that point in time, when I was supposed to be, it runs in my head as being 10 DME or something like that. and I was supposed to be at 11,000, and I was still up at 12 or 12.5, and I was in there, and I thought to myself, I need to make that DME stop. I'm getting closer and closer to the airport, but I haven't lost the altitude. How can I make that DME stop? And that's when I thought about blowing off the approach, calling center, and said, take me over to the Elephant VOR and let me figure this out. But I didn't. I stuck with it. And I said, the only way that I can think of to stop the DME from going down, getting less, is to turn left, because I didn't have the localizer either. It was showing that it was on my left. So I will turn left at 90 degrees, and that will mean I won't get any closer to the airport. I'll just parallel that deal. When I hook up with the localizer, I'll just turn inbound like I'm supposed to be. But meantime, I'm starting my descent to get down to the 10.5 or whatever is I'm supposed to be at. So I did that. I turned left. I intercepted the localizer. I turned right back in, and I'm headed for the airport. And I have my altitude under control now. I'm going down as it tells me to do in little increments like that. So I've got approach flaps, and I have approach power, and I've put the gear. Well, I didn't have the gear down yet. I was doing the approach. I didn't put the landing gear down until a little closer. I could see the lights flickering in the clouds, so I knew that there was what we call a rabbit. It's a series of white strobe lights that are in sequence that point to the airport. So it makes it really easy to see at night. I could see that was coming up, and as I went down one step at a time, I was back on the approach. I broke out of the clouds at 1,400 feet above the ground, but I could see another layer of clouds below me that I was going to have to go through. I just stayed on the approach, and as I went down through those clouds, I broke out at about 600 feet above the ground, something 500, something like that. I'm sitting there now at 500 feet. That's a good altitude for the approach to get into the airport. All I have to do is turn left and go over and get lined up with the runway and turn back in on the runway, and I'm at a good altitude. Everything's fine. I'm back on course. Everything's peachy keen. When suddenly I have to stop there, because I have to explain to you what happened. You remember I told you about Dwayne and I flew this airplane back and forth to NASA Ames out at San Jose many times. And most of the time we were flying at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, because it was I think almost a 5-hour flight with a fuel stop in the middle. And we had to be there at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever it was. We had a consortium agreement with NASA Ames to where they had a piece of thermal line scanning equipment, a thing that would detect a cup of coffee from 20,000 feet that they used for a lot of things, but they were still missing one little part. They wanted to put that scanning device on a U-2 spy plane. They didn't know how to do it, and they didn't have technicians that could do it easily without a whole bunch of rigmarole. We had worked with them before, and we had borrowed equipment from them when they had an older unit. They knew that we knew how to use it because we'd been using it in our airplane for a year or two. That was an RS-7, an older unit, and when they got the RS-25, which was the newest, latest and greatest thermal line scanner, the forward motion of the airplane created one axis and the spinning mirror created the other axis. The fact of the matter is, we were flying back and forth. We made an agreement with NASA that we could borrow their RS-25 line scanner if we would install that scanner in a U-2 and train them how to use it. Well, of course, I knew how to do that. So we made that agreement with NASA Ames. So Dwayne and I flew back and forth, especially in the winter time when it was colder and stuff, and we could really get some definition. But throughout the year, we flew back and forth. And I don't know, we probably made 8 or 10 trips back and forth on that over the period of a year or so. One night we were flying over western Wyoming, probably 1975, something like that. So it was a very sparsely populated area. There were just nobody lived out there. So we're flying along, and I remember Dwayne telling me I was in the left seat and he was in the right seat. And I remember him teaching me. He said, you know, when you're out here in this field like this and there's no lights around, he says you can't even see a horizon to keep the wings level, to reference it. So he says you have to fly on instruments. You are, even though you're just on a VFR visual flight rules plan, you're actually an IFR because you haven't got a reference out there that you can keep the airplane straight and level, up and down and left and right. He said, you know, that's what you're doing right now is looking at your instruments. And he said, one more thing to go along with that. He said, if you're doing this and you come to an airport and you're watching the airport, you have the airport in sight, and you see all the runway lights up and down the runway on both sides of the runway, and everything's cool. You can turn up the intensity of the lights just by clicking the radio. And he says, you've got that all in sight. In this case, in Juneau, we had the Rabbit to guide us to that point. So he says, if ever you see an airport that you have the runway lights in sight, and all of a sudden, from either direction, either right to left or left to right, the lights start to go out one at a time. What would that mean? And I thought about it for a second, and I said, it must mean that there's something between you and the light. And Dwayne said, yes, that's correct. He says, like a mountain, like terrain. He says that if that ever happens to you, if you need to go to the right to get away from it, or to the left if it's on the other side, you have to do that immediately, or you're going to be in deep doo-doo. You will not make it. And it was a great lesson. It was probably 3 years prior to me being at Juneau. So we're on this approach, and I've made the step downs correctly. I've gone through the second layer of cloud from 1400 down to 500. I'm now in the clear. I can see the airport, and I'm at 500 feet, right? All of a sudden, I was watching the runway, and one at a time, those landing lights started going out. I didn't think about it long. I put the airplane immediately into a 60-degree bank and went back to the localizer, back to the Rabbit, where I knew that the terrain had been cleared. I went back to the Rabbit, crossed over the airport, turned around this way, and landed. Uneventful. At that point in time, what I didn't do was almost a fatal mistake. What I didn't do before we got in the airplane to go down there knowing that I'd probably have to shoot an approach is I failed to look at the backside of the approach plate. I have copies of that approach plate, but they're not real legible. I will try and take a picture of those and have Dave incorporate that into this scenario before we get it taken care of so that you can actually see what I was looking at. So what was between me and the runway that was causing the lights to go up? It wasn't some little genie down there turning lights off. It was actually a mountain. I was at 500 feet. That knoll was at 582 feet. The next day, with my maps and looking the situation over, because we went back out there and looked it over. You got an airplane that's flying 130 knots, and when you swing it to turn, you don't just turn. It slides around the corner. The momentum of it slides around the corner. And taking all of that into consideration, I calculated that we were 7 seconds from impact. 7 seconds. At that point in time, the lights would have gone out forever for all of us on board that airplane. That would have been Jack and Larry and me. We wouldn't be here today. So that's why I dedicate this whole project of recording, documenting this wonderful adventure that culminates in almost an end. That's why I say it's the most important achievement of my life, because I was a 650-hour pilot that shouldn't have been doing what I was doing. I should have had 2,500 hours. Shouldn't have been doing what I was doing, but I had been through lots of little tight spots on this thing, lots of little skinny places that I shouldn't have made it, but we did for whatever reason. And this final one, I was able to get around that one also. So that's thanks to Dwayne Adam and the good Lord both, because without that help, we wouldn't be here today, bud. That's how close it was, 7 seconds. That's pretty intense. So we landed in Juneau, and we went in, and the Red Horse Saloon was open, and on Sunday night we were able to get a beer. And when I got out of the airplane, I knew what happened. They didn't know what happened. When I got out of the airplane, I couldn't hardly walk. My knees were so weak. Dave asked me a while ago if there's anything in this flight, those kind of things that scares you. Well, that one scared me. It didn't scare me at the time because I recognized everything that was going on. But boy, after I thought about it and saw what really happened, it scared me. Okay. So but we spent 2 more days in Juneau, a little mini vacation that Jack got us. We spent some time at the Red Dog Saloon, which is still there, by the way. I went to it when we were on that Alaskan cruise. Back then, it was just a dirt floor, and it was just a fun place to be. And we get up in the morning, we'd close the bar down. They only close at 5 o'clock in the morning. Open again at 6, hour to clean up. So we'd get out, spend that hour ringing the state capitol bell and riding on the teeter-totters that were out on the wharf and doing stuff we weren't supposed to be doing. Once again, we got away with it. We had a guy that tried to tell us that he wanted us to be shipmates on his thing and learn how to catch fish. I mean, they were looking for help and all this kind of good stuff. But of course, we couldn't do that. But it was tempting. Yeah, they were going to pay good money.
It was an outrageous amount of money.
Yeah, it was.
The problem is you got to survive it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Live on a trawler for weeks.
We had fun. I remember Larry picked up a king crab. It was a young one. Wasn't big enough to keep, but picked it up. We have pictures of it somewhere, and I haven't seen them yet. Him holding this king crab right there in the bay where we were, where the boats were moored and stuff. So it was a fun trip. And of course, after that, the 3 days we spent there, we headed for Seattle and then on back into Fort Collins. And everything was fine.
Yeah.
You got anything to say about all that?
Heck of a trip. But yeah, you think about it afterwards. It was just a marvel. It was a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, it was a great time. When I count the clock, I think I see 2 GIs' lives and 3 people in an airplane that didn't die because I took the right action. I'm very pleased. I'm proud of that fact. It's one of those things, and do you know what I found out when we got home? I don't know whether I told you this or anybody told you this or not, but I had from one of my very reliable sources. I was told, and I don't know whether this is true or not, I was told that when we left on that trip, they made a pool out of that, a lotto, whether we'd come back or not. Now, I'm glad we didn't know that when we left because things might have gone different. But as it was, we all just took care of business and did what we had to do.
Yep.
Whether we got away with it or whether the good Lord was helping us, you can make that choice yourself. But my money's on the good Lord. That's how the Great Otaki expedition, in its quest to find icicles on the Arctic Ocean, that's how it went. Do you have any other comments, Larry?
No, I just think over the commander and everybody else that, first of all, I must have done something right. I talked to him to let me go out on the ice, and he wouldn't even let his guys on the ice.
Yeah.
How did that happen? And how did they let me go?
Yeah. Yeah, it's different. Dave, you got any questions?
I was a neat story, and I got the full picture. I don't have any questions. Yeah.
And also have sitting here, I didn't introduce her a while ago, but is Larry's significant other, Miss Sherry. So do you have any questions?
I don't. I would just like to sit and listen to you guys talk about this over and over because I'm sure different stories would come out. It's been amazing to hear about it. I've heard Larry talk about it, but to hear the two of you together has been quite impressive and great fun to hear. And what an adventure for you guys, and what a great job you did.
Well, great, thank you. Sue, do you have anything? My pretty wife Sue's here.
Imagine how different it would have turned out if when they rang the bell, the damn thing broke.
We had a good
We'd
time.
be in the news forever.
This was the trip of a lifetime that nobody else could make. I mean, we made it, and you can't just go back and recreate a trip like this. And I've been toying about doing something like this for a lot of years now. This happened 45 years ago. I just never could get my act together to do it, and I finally pulled the chain and said it's time to make this happen. So.
Yeah, maybe someday in the future people see this and they'll find out, did we accomplish anything? Who knows?
Yeah.
Because the people that paid for it, they ain't going to tell us.
Yeah, well, and we did what we were told to do and accomplished that. So, well, I think that's from here. I hope all my family and friends that have, if you got to this point, you watched it, and I hope that it is meaningful to you. I hope it helps you understand some of the things. I've done a lot of things like this in my career, both flying and just out at ERC. And Larry's, I've worked with him now that was 45 years ago, and Larry and I had a good time doing the thermoscan thing like that. And we've done a lot of good things, and I think we did a good job on this one. We did everything we were told to do.
Yeah. And made do with what you have.
Yeah. So
That's
anyway,
the other thing.
that's
one of
our stories, and so
you want to be remote. That's one thing all three of us noted when we flew over the Brooks Range. There's nothing.
no place
If
to land.
you go down, no one will ever find you. Because at night, you can look left, right, up, down, behind you. Not a single light other than your wingtips. There was nothing.
You know,
5 hours.
before we closed down, on the break a while ago, we were talking about one thing that I did want to kind of mention. That's the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights. In Fairbanks, they were super beautiful. I mean, you couldn't make anything more gorgeous than that. We were just the right distance. But when we were in Barrow, you couldn't see them. They were above us. We were underneath them. And all you could just kind of see was the colors would roll like mountains, rolling mountains. The different colors would just kind of roll through. It was gorgeous. But you got to be there. Not everybody gets to go way up in the northern part of the Arctic Circle and be under the Northern Lights. So that's another thing that we got to do.
Yeah. And we went the right time.
Yep.
Because the lady I met up there and the other researchers that we visited now and then, you don't want to be there in the summertime.
Right. Sunlight 24 hours a day.
They 6 weeks
Yeah, 6
is
weeks.
about the summertime, and every critter needs to be born, reproduce, and eat in 6 weeks. They're all extremely hungry.
Yeah, the nights are long up there, and people have
They
psychological
just told us
problems with that.
you
But
cannot believe the bugs. It was
okay,
fun. It was perfect timing for us.
yeah, it was good stuff. Okay, well, thank you, folks.